Welcome to Embody Your Brilliance, a podcast for visionary daughters of immigrants and creative entrepreneurs. I'm your host, Eunice Kimian, somatic life and business coach, mom, and Korean American eldest daughter of immigrants. Each week, you'll hear stories, insights, and conversations to help you embody your unique brilliance beyond survival mode so that you can design a life you actually want and grow a peaceful, profitable business you're proud of that supports you. Hi, everyone. So today I want to share a little bit about my story and why I do what I do. So, where to begin? So, I grew up in Seoul, South Korea, and when I was 7, I immigrated to the US. And I would say that I'm a 1.5 generation Korean American, meaning I immigrated when I was a child. So, from the get go, I've always felt this pull between two places and this question mark around who I am and where I belong. And another big part of my identity growing up was being a big sister, or in Korean, I was called noona, which is a term for big sister to two younger brothers. So, I was 4 when I became a big sister, and that's one of my first core memories. And I have another younger brother who's 10 years younger than me. So, needless to say, hashtag eldest daughter, I was the default caretaker and second or third parent, depending on how you look at it, just because my dad had to stay in Korea for a lot of our childhood. And so it was really my mom and me and my brothers, and I just kind of naturally took on that parental role as if I'm my mom's partner in some ways. And let me know if that's something that you have gone through or resonate with, because I just feel like we need more of us to connect on this matter and feel less alone on this. But yeah, I was very much a caretaker from an early age. I grew up really quickly. Like, I don't remember a lot of my childhood. And I think I was also very naturally deep down empathetic, as in, like, yeah, really taking on that big sister role. But at the same time, actually, like, thinking back to how I was for my school years, I had this hard exterior because I thought that's what was going to help me succeed. Like, I was really intense, really hardworking, high achiever, did really well in school. I was a trailblazer. I got shit done, was very much a leader. And also had big dreams and big goals at an early age. So I would say, like, I hustled my way through life and didn't sleep much. And it really felt like I didn't need much sleep to function. And it's that survival mode version of me. And I feel like as a culture, Korea as a country is perpetually in survival mode. Like, everything about it is in survival mode. And in Korea, there's this concept called 빨리 빨리, which means hurry hurry. And I feel like that's just like Korea. And that's also me and my family. It's just like, okay, hurry hurry, 빨리 빨리. We got to do this, we got to do that, we got to go there. We got to get into school, we got to get to financial security, we got to do this. And I didn't really need a lot of, like, external pushing for me to be that way. I just had this, like, internal drive. And that version of me got me to Harvard, got me to these tech startups, got me to these different accolades and things, like external markers of success that just perpetually kept getting validated as something that I should be doing. And it's not that I, disagree with it. Like, it was very much something that I wanted and was proud of myself for achieving. But just, like, looking back, it's just pretty wild how much focus I had on those goals. And there were definitely costs to that, tunnel vision towards that goal. Like, while I achieved what I wanted to achieve to some degree, it cost me sleep. It cost me, I think, a lot of opportunities for, like, more friendships or a deeper presence and quality time and sense of peace. I was perpetually looking at the future, looking at my goal. I was never satisfied or peaceful in the present moment. I didn't feel like I could relax, and I didn't feel like I could enjoy. And there's this sense of urgency that just ruled my life. And ever since I was in college, I pretty much realized that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And so even when I was at Harvard, I was very much involved with the Harvard Innovation Labs, where it's like a hub for students across the graduate schools, law school, medical school, divinity school, all the schools, as well as the undergraduate college, and like bringing together all these different people who are interested in growing businesses. And there would be pitching, there would be funding, there would be like trips. So I really spent a lot of time there, and that was like what I thought like my career would be. And so even my first job out of college was at a startup, and a lot of my jobs in my career ended up being at different startups at different stages. And when I entered the workforce, this urgent drive to grow at all costs and achieve at all costs was also validated and praised, and I was promoted and I saw results. Like the startups that I helped grew, some of them like ended up really, really succeeding. And it's almost like I was always in a context or an environment where that hustle mode was always rewarded almost. My family, my parents just validated me for my work ethic. And, in terms of being present or sleeping, I just don't remember them emphasizing that as a form of success or form of importance. And in corporate or in school, it just like never was rewarded, this feeling of rest or health. It was very much, oh, yeah, good job for working yourself to the bone. And it was around this time, like, when I was maybe 20, like, I feel like my body just broke down, and there were many, many moments, actually. It's like a series of breakdowns. But at the time, like, when I was around 20, my body was in pain. My shoulders, my neck, my back was just, like, perpetually in pain, and I had scoliosis, so, like, I always blamed it on that, but it was, like, to the point where I couldn't sit anywhere for more than 10 minutes at a time. If we're on a road trip or just driving anywhere, I had to, like, pull over every 10 minutes to just release the tension in my back. So I went to physical therapy, I went to a chiropractor, I went to acupuncturist, a Western doctor, like everyone, and they really couldn't tell me anything. Besides, they were like, maybe you should try yoga, maybe you should try these stretches. And so that, along with me taking a required class in college, it was the Chinese philosophy class for my philosophy credit, that opened my eyes to a type of philosophy that is basically outside of Western philosophy that I was taught in my education in elementary, middle, high school. We just never learned about Asian philosophy in my school system. And so in college, that was the first time where I literally just took a course on that. And we would talk about Buddhism, Taoism, Confucianism, Hinduism, a lot of different philosophies. And what was so life changing about it was that it made me understand my parents more and also Korean culture more. And it helped me get curious about, wow, I just feel like my mind just is like remembering that I come from this culture where there are so many different ways of thinking and ways of communing with each other and ways of defining values for success that made me kind of question, what is my philosophy? What is my relationship like with spirituality? And so I delved deeper into that with other courses. I studied a lot of cultural psychology and how cultures influence how we think and how we behave. And soon after I started my first job, I really felt this calling to go back to Korea on this almost spiritual pilgrimage of connecting back with my ancestors and exploring my spirituality, my creativity. So I ended up convincing my manager at the time that I wanted to work remotely. And this was before COVID. And so it was very bold of me, I think, looking back to just ask for that because like no one was working remotely. But that allowed me to have the financial stability while exploring my roots, my spirituality, my creativity. And that's where I got my yoga teacher certification and just really embarked on yoga and meditation as tools to explore my relationship with my mind and body and spirituality. And, I was meditating and I was physically feeling better too with the back pain and everything. And I realized that when I was in Korea, so much of my ancestral healing journey, like there were things like, I did temple stays and I apprenticed under a calligraphy master and did all sorts of cool things. But what I ended up doing was, like, spending a lot of time with my dad unexpectedly, and I realized, okay, yeah, that I asked for ancestral connection and healing, and he is an ancestor, so I was like I was looking for something, like, more I don't know what I was expecting, but it wasn't that, and I think just being with my dad too, of, like, seeing how all those years of being in survival mode and, like, working himself to the bones, like, it makes sense why I am the way I am and why I was the way I was. There is this sense of I need to hustle like every minute of the day in order to survive, in order to provide for my family. And this, like, I don't know, just this surviving at all costs manifesting in health problems. And so for me, I realized at some point that so much of my back pain and shoulder pain and my body breaking down was psychosomatic, meaning it was from years of my mental stress, working in overdrive, unexpressed emotions and desires, just like generations of pressure in my body manifesting in this debilitating chronic back pain and also honestly my nervous system shutting down and saying enough is enough. And part of what happened, which was a pivotal moment in my somatic healing journey, is that I met my now husband Nick. And fun fact, we went to high school together and we re-met on Bumble of all places 10 years later when he came back from Copenhagen, I came back from Korea, and he and our relationship actually helped me remember my why around healing, like really stepping into my role as a healer, and I mean that in a loose term. I realized that my voice could be healing, my storytelling could be healing, my way of being can be healing if it's intentional in that way. And he comes from a long line of therapists and teachers and yeah, like, he has had a very different story growing up, and through that relationship, I found this I don't know, like I was able to start building my sense of safety in my body and be a little less enmeshed with my family dynamics and my family's survival mode nervous system because I was able to have this space and relationship where I was able to explore myself outside of family. And the reason why also this was pivotal in this journey and why I'm mentioning this is because he was working at a nonprofit and it was all about trauma resolution through somatics and trauma informed mindfulness. And they do these trainings all across the world to communities who need support in recovering from trauma and finding peace and calm and okayness after something very difficult. And so he was working there, he was leading these trainings, and he got called to Hilo, Hawaii for a training, for a community training because of the Mount Kilauea eruption, and a lot of people had unfortunately lost their homes. and I was invited to join that training. So when I went on that training, it was a 4 to 5 day blur of an experience. That's where I got trained in the modality of trauma informed mindfulness and somatic healing. I had been studying somatic healing beforehand too, like because yoga and mindfulness and meditation had led me to other teachers that I was learning from. But this was a turning point because through learning how to work with my nervous system in this way, I Nick and I ended up getting engaged in Hawaii, not by plan, like, we didn't plan to do that, but it was just this surreal time where the connection between ourselves, like, with each other, was so felt on another dimensional level. My connection with my body, my connection with my spirituality, my connection with the land, our connection with the rest of the group, our connection with the nature there. I don't know, there was something in the air, and I don't know if I should share this whole story around our engagement and everything. It's like a really, yeah, it's a whole story. But anyway, okay, maybe I'll just share it. So we landed, and like pretty much like a day or two after, we're watching this documentary about Mount Kilauea, the eruptions. It's a very, I don't know if it's somber, but it's about the volcanic eruptions. So we're watching this thing, and I kept tapping his shoulder, feeling this deep nudge to propose to him, but, like, I kept, nudging him, and he was like, "What?" And I was like, "Oh, nothing. Now's not the time." And I kept doing that, like, literally, "What am I doing?" And after the screening, he got up and he was like, "Wait, so what are you trying to tell me?" And I was like, "Now's not the time." And someone somewhere in the theater was like, "If not now, then when?" And I was like, "Excuse me?" And then later I talked to that person who I call Lil Nudge in our story. He was like, "Yeah, I wasn't even talking to you. I was talking to my friend about a basketball game." And, like, what are the chances, right? And so it really just felt like, yeah, so surreal. But anyway, unbeknownst to me, Nick was also feeling this deep nudge to propose to me, and I think it was a day or 2 later that he ended up planning this whole thing, and he was working with our host there, who was this native Hawaiian woman. She took us into her garden and was explaining what the meaning of a tea leaf is and how it's this symbol of protection. And she picked one for us. And we learned how to create this tea leaf bracelet with our toes. And then she's like, now you may give each other your tea leaf bracelets. I was like, oh my gosh, I don't want his foot made tea leaf bracelet on me, but okay, whatever. And I was like, "What is this vibe? It feels a little, I don't know, a little ceremonial, like, why are we doing this? Now you may put the bracelet on her wrist," sort of thing. And I was like, "Okay, what are we doing?" And while we're doing this, we saw these 2 little yellow birds next to us playing, and I was like, "Oh, what are those birds?" And she was like, "Those are lovebirds." Yeah, so this is why I was like, should I share this story or not? Because it's a little bit sappy. But anyway, so part of like what we did as an exercise for this nervous system healing, somatic healing training was resourcing, which is a tool that I use and share with my clients as well. But I uncovered that one of my resources is floating in the just, like, warm, silky water, and it's almost like being in a womb, and I just feel this really pleasant, silky sensation on my arms, and I'm just floating and looking up at the sky, and so I guess Nick took that to heart and was trying to take us to this place where it's warm water and we can float in there and he'll propose there. But as we're going there, there was a person who stopped us in our car and was like, "Oh, where are you trying to go?" And we said, the place that we're trying to go. And they're like, "Oh, no, you can't go there. It's been contaminated from the volcanic eruption. You might get sepsis." And I was like, "Oh my God." And so we were like, "Okay, so we'll just go somewhere else." And we go through this really cool, the only word that comes to mind is like this enchanted road, which is literally what it's called. Like we later Googled it. And we go there and then we turn right to this cliff and it's like this cosmic, you see this like Milky Way curving in the sky and it's just this pleasant breeze and like ocean water crashing into the cliffs and there's this beautiful tree and we had just done a tree of life exercise in this training and it's like, "Oh my god, that's that exact tree that I drew." So anyway, like it's just been so magical and that's where he proposed. And the reason why I share this story, this tangential story, is because this is where I felt peace for the first time on a nervous system level for a prolonged period of time, where I felt like time just stood still, like that whole week. And I really had this felt sense of what somatic healing and somatics can do, not just from a trauma resolution standpoint. And I think somatic healing is very much prominent in the trauma world for a good reason because it really helps, right? But I think it was that week that for the first time, experienced in my body how connecting with your mind, body, spirit through somatics can actually unlock creativity on a whole new level, peace on a whole new level, relationship, love, all the things. Like it was just felt like you're accessing a portal to a different dimension, even though we're in the same place. It's like if the version of me in survival mode and that version of me who is very much well resourced and her nervous system was very nourished in that moment, we're in that same reality and it feels like a completely different experience. You know what I mean? And so I was really, really inspired by that pivotal experience for me. And since then, I just went deeper and deeper, deeper into my somatic healing work. I've worked with and learned from somatic therapists, doulas, educators, different spiritual teachers, life alignment coaches, leadership coaches, as well as different modalities of the voice. And I share that story as a way of saying that around that time was when I realized that all this time, the version of me that was hustling, that hustle was fueled by this deep down subconscious belief that if I'm successful enough, I'll finally be okay. I'll finally be safe. I'll finally be enough and worthy. And then I can relax. But because of that felt sense of peace, that was the first taste where I was like, how can I share more of this with the world and how can I deepen this within me? So around this time that this happened was around the time that I launched my company. And my first business, first official business was this meditation pants brand. And it was inspired by my temple stay in Korea and my ancestral healing journey that I was talking about, my, pilgrimage back to Korea. And first of all, these meditation pants, Zen pants are so cool. Looking back, there's just so many things I would have done differently in terms of how to make this actually profitable and sustainable. But I made a lot of, I don't know if I would call mistakes, but I made a lot of decisions in that business that made it like unsustainable. But it was really fun, like, I spent years on this, and I shared my creative vision with the community in New York City. That's where we moved after we got engaged. Anyway, this is all to say, I feel like the somatic healing journey also influenced my entrepreneurial journey in the sense that feeling peace in my body allowed me to dream big and allowed me to approach entrepreneurship from beyond just this survival mindset, and also allowed me to access the creativity that was necessary for me to put myself out there. So this is like the first time in my life, first of many times when somatics and creativity and entrepreneurship just sort of merged and this feeling of freedom to express myself after years of feeling like I couldn't do that. Side note, I think comes from a lot of like maternal lineage, generational suppression of the women in my lineage of feeling like they need to be silent in order to be safe. And part of me not being silent was using my voice, like expressing myself creatively, and part of that through my entrepreneurship. And so through this Zen pants, which, by the way, I don't know how people find me and find these pants, but I still get orders. Like, it's not public on my website, but I guess if you're interested, let me know. I have a few more, but yeah, it's funny how, like, it still sells right now. But I shared my story for the first time, like, in front of it was this Lunar New Year market that I was a vendor at sharing my Zen pants, and I just remember, like, the organizer of the event tapped on my shoulder and was like, "Okay, it's time for you to share to the group." There were a lot of people there. They were like, "We want each vendor to share, introduce themselves." And I was freaking out. I was like, "What are you talking about? You never told me this. What am I gonna say?" I always thought I had to prepare everything that I was gonna say. I remember I went up there and I blacked out. It was one of those things where I was like, I have no idea what's coming out of my mouth. But I just remember someone took a picture of the scene where there's just, like, a bunch of people around me and I'm sharing my story, and it was just surreal for me to take up space in that way and share my honest story and have so much resonance. Like, I ended up doing really well in sales that day because I think I just really leaned into my story, and that's how I kind of went back into corporate because I had already quit my job to go full-time into somatic healing as well as this fashion brand. But when I felt like I couldn't scale it without feeling this sense of stability, because around the time that happened, Nick and I decided to get married. And so there's something about, like, I don't know about you, but for me, a life change like marriage made me feel like, oh, I need security. And the thing is, like, every time I felt this urge to feel secure again financially, my go-to survival method was just to go back to corporate. And it's not to shame that, or I used to think that that was sort of a failure on my part, but every business or entrepreneurial venture requires capital, right? It requires money. And whether you borrow that money, whether you use your savings or you work while you use that money to fund it, it actually, there is no, that's just like what it is, you know? But for some reason, I thought I failed or I am giving up. But I didn't actually think I was, like, fully giving up, I just knew that this was temporary, I just need to re-up on my capital to survive and feel secure. So around the time we got married, I started back at a startup, but more specifically in sales and growth because I actually, it goes back to that market experience where I shared my story and felt so alive and used my voice to connect with people, and I was like, "Okay, what if I just get paid to connect with people and share my voice and sell things?" Because I thought learning how to sell and learning how to grow a company and build businesses from the ground up is exactly the skill that I know will be helpful for me as a business owner down the line. So that's how I ended up, like, going back to corporate, which, by the way, it was so stressful and it was just like going back into that hustle mode. And outside of that, I was still doing somatic healing work and facilitation. And even through the pandemic, I was very much working and grinding through these startups and finding a lot of success in helping these businesses scale. It was around the anti-Asian hate crimes, the Atlanta shooting. I think it was like March 2021 when my body also broke down again. Kind of similar to the first time around the back pain, but there was this like lower back pain the day after the shooting happened. It's like this pulsing pain. I was telling someone about this, like a mom, and she's like, "Oh, that sounds like my back labor." And at the time, I was like, "Yeah, something needs to be birthed. I need to make a change." And that's when I left the startup that I was at to go full time again in terms of my somatic healing work. But this time, I was facilitating somatic healing workshops for companies through ERGs, employee resource groups, and holding private sessions and coaching individuals and launching group programs. That's when I launched Soul Speakers, which was my somatic healing program for the diaspora around unblocking your voice. So again, there's just been so many iterations of how somatics, daughters of immigrants, business, everything's just been like all showing up on my journey, but all sort of like siloed into these different parts of my life. Corporate, that's where I did business stuff. and then somatic healing for daughters of immigrants was separate. And this all sort of came to a head when I became pregnant with my son. And I remember, I think I was 5 months pregnant, and it was that blurry time between Christmas and New Year's when I should for sure be, relaxing and taking vacation and spending quality time, and that's just what I wanted and anticipated. But because at the time the company I was at was going through mass layoffs, like the majority of my team was already laid off, and there's this urgency around if you don't hit a certain quota or if you don't bring in a certain level of revenue, you're going to get laid off feeling. And so I was like so close to maternity leave, and I was like, what are you talking about? So I worked so hard, and I remember I was hunched over my computer with my 5-month pregnant belly, just like trying to see if this prospective client emailed me back with their signature for this deal that needed to close for me to stay hired. And I was like, what am I doing? Like, this is reminiscent of the road to burnout that I was feeling. And I realized that this is the moment I really need to stop this sprint burnout cycle, and I needed to find a different way. I understand that there's so many ways to do this. There is no right or wrong way to do this, but for me, that was the moment when I was like, I really need to figure out a way to make my business profitable and financially viable enough so that I don't rely on corporate in order to give me the resources that I need to live as I become a mom, because the thought of being hunched over my computer doing this between Christmas and New Year's next year with my newborn was just unfathomable. I just did not want that. And that's when I realized, how can I leverage every single life and business lesson that I've learned to make this as probable as possible. My goal to make this peaceful, profitable business. So it's like I started incorporating my somatic healing work into how I was running my business, right? If I was noticing that in entrepreneurship, I'm feeling a little bit unstable or feeling activated or feeling uncomfortable, instead of just like running back to corporate or just, I don't know, like overthinking, I realized like, okay, like how can I nourish my nervous system and listen to my body and get clear on what is actually happening on a nervous system level so that I can actually access that strategic brain, that creative brain, my zone of genius, which I have done before. It's like, how can I re-access that in order to make smart decisions, in order to create a stable, financially viable business that I feel passionate about, that supports me and supports my life, gives me the freedom to show up as the fulfilled, present mom that I wanted to be, because that became the non-negotiable in that moment of like, I want to be a present mom. I want to feel peace now, not later. I want to feel fulfillment now. I want to feel like I can support myself, and I want to feel like I can be supported by others too. Like, I don't want to do my business alone. I want a team around me. Yeah, so I just got very clear on what I wanted. And I think being pregnant also helped me learn the power of a care team and a support team. Cause like I definitely knew that I didn't want to do motherhood by myself. I wanted a village, I wanted a care team. That was the most supported I've ever been in my life, actually. So it's like I had my doula, my birth doula, my postpartum doula, I had my chiropractor, acupuncturist, my partner, my midwife, my OB, like all the things. And I was like, it makes sense that there's this village and care team around you when you're carrying life and about to birth this baby into the world. Same thing with business though, right? Like we need support. And so many times, for example, with the meditation pants brand, if I had support, I wonder if I would have given up in that moment? And so that is all to say that was a big turning point for me. And so towards the end of my pregnancy, I was intent on building it in this way, and postpartum as well during my maternity leave. And as I was doing this, I was surrounded by support, even from a business standpoint. And there were variations of what I had brought into the world through my business, including supporting mothers specifically through their pregnancy, birth, and postpartum, But as I was doing this, I noticed that it still was missing something and I wasn't sure what. And I realized that this whole time, my corporate experience of building businesses from the ground up, my passion for entrepreneurship starting from the college years, plus the fact that this is ancestral for me, entrepreneurship. My spirit guide, who's my great grandmother, 할머니, she, I learned, was an entrepreneur too, just like my dad. And she, during the war, fled. She had to run away from the North with 6 children, and one of them was a newborn. Like, she was recently postpartum, and her husband recently passed away, so she started a company. She started a hardware store to provide for her and her family, and I was like, "This is a birthright for me, and this is a passion, and why don't I reclaim this and combine this into my work so it's not just somatics and somatic healing for daughters of immigrants and business as my separate self, but how can I incorporate my business strategy version of me, my wealth of experience there, my 10 plus years of growing businesses from the ground up with my 10 plus years of experience of supporting daughters of immigrants from a somatic standpoint, generational healing, nervous system healing, culturally informed coaching. And that's when everything started clicking for me. It was sort of like realizing that there's this unmet need, that mindset and strategy can only take us so far when our bodies are bracing for danger as daughters of immigrants in business. And entrepreneurship can be a roller coaster of an experience emotionally. And it's like there's so much risk involved. It's a series of risks, it's a series of decisions. And I realized that there's an unmet need out there where it's most business coaches don't have the nervous system healing background or the somatic healing background. And most therapists and somatic healers don't have the business background or the startup background that I have. So I was like, this is my unique highest level skill set for a problem that I firsthand experienced. And it's the type of support that I wish I had. And it's like what literally like the people in front of me are telling me they're struggling with. So that's how I really found this somatic business coaching work. And, I always say like a lot of times what we're going through on our entrepreneurship journey is not necessarily just a mindset issue, right? It's our bodies doing what it was trained to do, which is to protect you. And so I love this work. This is kind of a very non-linear way of how I got to what I am doing now. And I'm sure there might be another future episode talking about my story in a different way or going deeper into some areas. But this is how it came out today. So this is what I'm trusting that wants to be shared today. And I'm curious what resonated with you and if there's anything in my story that felt familiar or parallel in your journey. And I would love to hear from you. So DM me on Instagram or reply to me on email. I have a few spots open for one-on-one somatic business coaching. So if you're an entrepreneur or a creative looking to grow your business, if you have growth goals, income goals, visibility goals, and you're finding yourself stuck or wanting more support to find that grounded momentum, book that one-on-one clarity call or DM me. And I would love to hear what your vision is and help you bring it to life. I literally am so passionate about this work, and I hope my story today gave you a little bit more color as to what brought me to this work and also why I care so deeply about this. And I have an upcoming event called Safe to Shine. It's all about feeling safe to be visible as daughters of immigrants and women of color entrepreneurs and creatives who are ready to grow in visibility and make more money and feel safe being seen. So, RSVP to that. I'll add that link to the show notes. But yeah, thank you for listening to my story, and I'll see you in the next one.